Hey, hey, hey. Guess what time
Whoa.
it is, kids? It's time for another edition of Ska Talk with Mr. Kingpin. I am your host, Johnny Bravo, aka Mr. Kingpin, sometimes Johann Pumpernickel, if I'm feeling animated particularly.
This guy.
Oh, snap. That just happened.
He didn't even know about it. Like
I,
literally 10 minutes ago, I photobombed him with some jackets. And then I
yes.
had to I had to sadly admit that the jackets have actually been sitting here for like 6 weeks. I just haven't showed it.
Yeah, I was
Uh,
a very excited. I didn't even want to do the show. I just wanted to talk about the record.
and then when I showed him the test pressing, he just like, we're done here. This was all a ruse just to see if the test pressings and the sleeves were done. So we're just gonna shut down and
Yeah,
retool.
we're not even
Oh,
live, Chuck. We're
who
not. This is
cares?
just a ploy to get to talk to you.
Right? This is just a ploy. Yeah, this is yeah, you're just catfishing right
Yes.
now.
Is that the term? That's what the kids are saying, right?
I don't know. That's probably what the 52-year-old soccer moms are saying, including myself. So
Well, welcome to the show, Mr. Chuck Wren,
thank you.
the uh, founder, creator of Jump Up
Yes,
Records,
and janitor.
and
No,
so,
no one's cleaning up my messes. It's just me.
and you are
Um,
in your laboratory as we speak. It looks like.
I am, yeah, at the office. So I also work. Pretty much my entire life worked for different record distributors um, over the years. So Jump Up has always had the pleasure of living in the back of whatever warehouse or company that I run or work at. So
That's a
I have a desk. I have a desk to go to. I have separation, so my family doesn't want to kill me too bad. Uh, there's a place that I go that's separate. Although, at times like this, when I'm launching record store day titles and stuff like that, I'm literally shuffling, boxes and product home, and I'll just be watching TV at 1 in the morning, taping up orders, just
mm,
keep up with the demand. So they haven't been happy with me the past 2 days.
yeah. You've been pretty busy.
Yeah, it's been pretty busy. So, but I like to do.
Well, want to thank you for taking some time out to talk to
Sure.
us, do a little ska talk,
Yeah.
and
Hashtag. Gotta
hashtag.
talk.
But before we start the ska talk, I'm just going to throw out a couple news bits that I found on the interwebs this week.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
First bit of news from Jump Up Records.
Yes.
Scotalites and Skanking Lizard Record Store Day editions are now shipping from the
Yes. Oh
website.
wait. You want to look at them, don't you?
Yeah, of
Oh,
course.
great. I just happen to have one here.
What a coincidence.
So yeah, this record was kind of fun. Came out in the year 2000 originally, and it was basically an album that was lost in time. Skylights Bashaka.
Hmm.
It was lost in time for many reasons. The year 2000 was pretty much the epicenter of the crash,
Yeah.
the mainstream crash of this thing we called ska. So CD wasn't in many stores. Let's put it that way. Then the original label and producer actually went bankrupt. So all the
Oh,
CDs
wow.
actually, yeah. So all the CDs actually got quick sold to Ernie B for like $1. So they were literally not in stores. They were. I mean, everyone I know who owns one, it has like a drill hole punch in it because they were just cutouts.
Hmm.
And the artwork was kind of blah. Um, so no one bought that CD except for a true small hardcore following that literally knew that it was coming out, wanted to buy it, and it was dead on arrival. So, when I was talking with Ken and the band about doing some more reissues for them, 'cause I did 3 with Shanachie for the 3 record store days prior to this, and I wanted to do some deals direct with the band. And like, well, what can actually help you guys get records on your merch table so money's going right into your pocket? So none of this in between. Well, I licensed it from another company who said never really recouped. I mean, all that nonsense,
Right.
which everything in the music industry. He said, well, we'd love to put out Bashaka, but no one knows about that album at all. I said, that album's fantastic. Like, the artwork is terrible. Like, if I redid that album for you, I would have Chema do all the art from scratch, just out of his head. I would have to rebrand it entirely. But I mean, so many of the original players were still alive and playing. I mean, as Lloyd Brevitt, Lloyd Knibb, Doreen Schaefer's on it, Lester Sterling's on it. I mean, they had Ken Booth as a guest on one of the tracks, and the record's fantastic. And it would just, no one knew about this record. So it's almost like a brand new Scatolites record for people.
Wow.
And as you know, many people in this current generation, CDs are like kryptonite. Like, they don't want them. Even if it's like a good deal, it's nuts. So, you almost have to keep a catalog item like this alive by putting it out on vinyl. I mean, it's survival at this point. A lot of albums are just disappearing simply because they're not on vinyl, which is nuts.
Yeah.
And you can actually get a lot of interest in an old band that has been completely forgotten with a vinyl reissue. So, the second one we did is the Skank and Lizard anthology. And they only had a couple records out back in like 1981, 82. And they had tons of stuff recorded. So we did some yellow vinyl, we did some lizard green vinyl as well. And then we kind of had an old looking, almost like poster flyer with all their old ads from all the places they used to play, like Cubby Bear and On Broadway and all these places. But, Skank and Lizard was basically this band that everyone forgot. Time forgot because, a lot of those original 45s vanished. They never actually officially put out a CD during the CD era. So they just sort of were forgotten. And they recorded tons of stuff, and they were literally Chicago's first reggae band, started in like 1978. So, we did this anthology record, and I banded it with the Scatolites so people would give it a shot, as you're picking up the Scatolites record for not too much extra. You could pick up this really great anthology that I'm personally like really stoked about. I mean, I reached out and found the original singer and just asked him if he wanted to do it and if he had, all that old material available. And he let me pick some of my favorite tunes off of it. And it was funny because the whole time I think we were doing it and talking about it, I think he felt that it was going to go south at some point. Like, this guy's gonna lose.
Too good to be true.
Lose interest. This is ridiculous. He's like, I have no art. I have no art direction. I have a bunch of old photos. Cool, send them to me. I want to just take your original 45 art because that's what everyone remembers and just sort of tweak it a tad, and take your old photos. He just kept almost like saying, are you sure you want to do this? I'm like, I am extremely sure. He's like, well, I don't know how to find those people. I'm like, that's not your job. You try to find people that, are literally a generation older than me, and I'll get this into the hands of people my age or younger. Like, my job is to turn people on to you guys and your legacy that's been forgotten completely. And if you find some of your old fans still have their turntables, that's fantastic. But, I'm always up for a challenge. I mean, the truth of the matter is, I quite often just put out records because I'm determined, you know, to find those new fans, you know, and in many ways, like your project, that kind of came out of the accidental quarantine mode,
Yeah.
like you're not a touring band. You're trying to play some shows, but you're not actually a touring band. But the record was great, and I like the art direction that came out so naturally and perfectly, and I was just all on board. I think to some extent when I was joking that Alan from Skank and Lizard was, at some point thinking, "Is he really going to do this? He seems like really into it," and that's surprising in this business. I kind of intimidated you too, where
Well, especially
like,
because I'd known you for a long time.
like, well, I've known you for 30 years and you haven't done squat for me.
Yeah. So it was just kind of surprising, like weird how fast that came together.
Right. And then I'll literally say things like, "Wow, I think this is fantastic. I really think I need to put this out." And then you're like, "Did he say he's putting it out?" That was kind of an indirect, almost third person way, like, and then,
But that's
I remember, listening to it and liking it and just had already decided myself. And then and I had actually texted Ryan, Old Exceptions Ryan / Boss Riot Ryan, a fellow Dallas Texan.
That's right.
Ryan Reeves. And I said, "Man, I'm loving John's new thing, man. I'm telling you, man, I got to put it out." He's like, "Yeah, he's already told me." I'm like, "Wait, what?"
Oh, yeah.
He beat you to the punch by 20 minutes. Like, oh, well, cool. We're all on the same page.
Yeah, because Ryan and you and I, we got the Midwest Connect. So
right, exactly.
If anybody would enjoy hearing that, it would be him.
Yeah, and he was like, you know what you're doing, and I think you're right. Your instincts are always right. And I'm excited about this, man. And normally it's intimidating to put out records that aren't touring bands or stuff like that, but every so often you just got to do it. So what I did last year, the Mitch King Kong 4, record, he's like, "Oh, well, we're never going to really be a touring band." I'm like, "Yeah, but your songs are so good. You're like the Elvis Costello of ska. I mean, listen to these songs, and every time someone gets that record, based upon the description, and quite often I'll get a message back like, "You nailed it, man. This reminds me of Elvis Costello if he was playing, two-tone ska. Like, this is fantastic." I'm like, "Yeah, isn't it?" And I actually felt guilty last year because it was on a bunch of year-end charts, right? Which is something that most labels feel like, "Oh, awesome. Yeah, it deserves to be on the chart. Gets more people to know about it." But those songs are not new. I mean, the King Kong 4 record was basically my favorite songs from 3 or 4 EPs he did over the past 3 or 4 years. I mean, there was nothing dated 2020. It was just I just felt at that point it needed to come out. It was, so all these people were like, "Oh, brand new album from the King Kong 4. I'm like, okay.
See, I like hearing that what's driving you to release music is you still get excited about hearing things that are, sometimes, obviously it's business and you got to make business decisions, but when the first thing is listening to music and really being into it and wanting to help, get more people to listen to it, that is a very good way to start.
I mean, I think it's kind of a lost art, I still think that no matter what type of music you're doing, people who have that kind of love of the music first, right? I mean, those are the ones that should be in the driver's. Not someone like, "Oh, let me check on my daily Google Analytics. My Facebook says that I have this many streams and this many clicks and da 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 da. And I tell people that kind of stuff all the time. They're like, oh, we're really popular in Mexico. I'm like, yeah, everybody is. Who cares? Like, I need to make you popular everywhere else, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Also, have you tried to sell records in Mexico? Doesn't really work. I've tried everything. And guess how? This is a funny story, but literally, there was like a guy earlier this week. He said, I want to buy a bunch of records. I'm like, yeah, I've had so many problems with the Mexican post office. I've almost felt like writing off shipping down there. And then I get a text from Chema. He was like, oh, Chuck, can I pick up some Skylights records? I'm going to Mexico for the week. I'm like, hey, would you mind bringing this guy's order for me and then shipping it when you get to Mexico? He's like, yeah, no problem. So I messaged the guy. I'm like, hey, it's your lucky day. Close friend of mine who does all my art, he is flying to Mexico City on Thursday. So if you're paid up in the next hour, I will give him the package today. and we got around this little problem. So, but I mean, we're at that point where like literally,
it's getting weird everywhere though, shipping. Because shipping to Europe is getting pretty pricey and
yeah. Well, I actually use a different service. I don't use the post office because it's to send one record, it's like $25.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a FedEx International mail bag.
Oh, okay.
We pay about $8.50 to ship one record anywhere in the world. So that's why we do the bundle deal where anyone could put 3 records in an order and only pay $10 to ship it. So we subsidize it a little bit.
Right.
The Europeans love that. They're like always ordering 3 records and they're only paying $10 to ship all 3 records. And it takes a little longer to get there, like 4 weeks. But they're just happy because records are expensive, man. I mean,
yeah,
it's really sad. We did our best for years. I mean, sometimes, someone will share like or like I'll get a Facebook memory type thing, right? Like, oh, in 2010, you did this, and it was literally like one of my deals in like, I want to say 2012 or 2013 was 10 records for $50. And I was not losing money. Like I was getting my wholesale price at that rate. And it's unfathomable now. You can't do that. You're nowhere close. I mean, but at one point, before everything got crazy, you could make records for a couple dollars a unit. That existed before all this craziness, before, Taylor Swift, sells 100,000 units in a week,
Which is kind of weird because you would think because more plants have popped up and it's become so popular in the last like decade for vinyl to come back, it's like back. It wasn't just a gimmick. It's right. Like legitimately, but it's crazy that it's still so pricey, but it's because there's only a few places, right?
Right. Even with all the new plants, I mean, they can't keep up with the demand at those kind of levels. I mean, one of these new fancy pressing plants like the one I use in Chicago, if they're at optimal, it's still only 3 a minute coming off the press. It takes a long time to get to 100,000 units, and 100,000 units is what's sold in that first week. Think of how many had to be out there to sell those numbers, right? You need like 200,000. So it's gotten bonkers. And part of what's become problematic is a lot of the majors, who blew this format off for ages, and it was the indies and indie stores that, kept it alive, then made it viable, made it interesting, made it available just in time for the majors to come in and kick them all out of their plants, So, literally the guy who you met indirectly online, who cuts the records for me, based in Dallas, his full-time job is managing a plant in Florida. and he's on call 24 hours a day because the plant is running 24 hours a day. And the reason why no one has heard of the plant is because they're basically just pressing records for major labels.
Yeah.
But 10 years ago, that pressing plant pressed records for independent labels, pretty much only. And they're all gone to other plants, So, that's part of the problem is that, a lot of the plants that, were kept alive by the indies were all of a sudden just kind of, lured away. And, they'll just charge the majors a little bit more and let them jump in front of the line. And then all of a sudden, Joe Schmo is like waiting, a year to get a record made, which is crazy. Like, how many bands can put out new material, right? Record it, want to go out and support it. Oh, but we won't have our vinyl for like 9 months. And that's tough. And that's kind of like the average small band going through like a broker to get records made, and I think, a lot of people like myself or, Mike at Asian Man or even Mike at Bad Time, we've all kind of figured out that, people really don't love.
Yep.
The phone, right?
Yeah.
Is that all of a sudden someone calls you?
Oh, that's what happened.
Yeah, and then it shakes it. And now I don't know.
So you might have turned your photo off, but.
Oh, here we go. Do you see me now? Okay, we're back.
So you were about to say something interesting. Not a lot of people actually like vinyl. Is that where you were going?
No, they don't. No, a lot of people don't like waiting.
Waiting, okay.
Paying and waiting for like 6 months. So if you've gotten kind of smart, you kind of have to put things into production months and months and months early.
And then just not talk about it until it's.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of these records are like, hey, I only had to wait 4 or 5 weeks to get it. Well, it's because someone was doing their job, right, in the background, getting it mastered. Yeah, getting it to that point,
Right.
Because they don't want to take your money and wait,
Although I feel like in some ways people are getting conditioned that that's how it works with vinyl.
Yeah, but are they happy about it? The conditioning is kind of, it's good and bad. I think, it's almost like an abusive relationship. As long as you don't like really abuse it, you're fine. But some labels may just ask for too many things in advance at once, and it's not really right. You gotta get a couple of records out first, get those people who paid for records all psyched in their hands, and then move on to the next project. I do agree that people have been kind of conditioned that this is the only way that it's possible, but it's not real. I mean, we don't actually ever take pre-orders because I hate them, because I don't feel good about it. I don't like holding people's money.
Right.
For one, because at that point you kind of open the floodgates for someone to just keep asking, when's it coming out? When's it coming out? Hey man, is that coming out soon? You originally said June. Is it coming out? I can't take that.
I watched a video of Mike Park having to deal with, like, he was answering his emails, and he gets a lot of that stuff.
Well, the thing is, if you didn't take someone's money, you could just ignore that email. I mean, it's not the worst thing to do. If someone's like, "When's this record coming out?" Like, "Oh, you'll know." That's usually what I tell people. Like, I want to make sure I don't miss that Scofflaws reissue. You won't. Well, how do you know? I know. Like, are you following me on like Instagram? And say, yeah, you'll know. Can I give you the money now? No. You don't have to, and I don't want you to. You know,
So
and I'm really glad that people are, excited about, records to the point where, you know, they're trying to force you to take their money.
that's right.
But and then when someone does that, you kind of feel like, oh, I really made the right decision on that.
Okay, so now it's become obvious that you have to toil a lot to go through all this process.
Oh yeah. So for example, Satellites record I just showed you,
yeah,
I mastered and cut the lacquers in December.
wow. So
Because
question.
I wanted to press that. Yeah, I wanted to press that up at Archer in Detroit, and he needed a little bit more time, and he wasn't really sure if that big electronic music festival was happening, where he was going to have a lot of last minute, techno guys like needing 200 of a 12-inch or something.
Oh wow.
So he's like, I need extra time. I'm like, that's cool. And then that Skank Lizard, I think I cut that back in December too. So you just sort of have to roll with the punches.
Yeah.
I mean, the joke was that I had your jackets, right? I've already
Right.
had them for like 6 weeks. That's kind of what you have to do. You just got to make the things, have them stored, so you're ready to go, right? If your plant's like, okay, you're up this week. What if you had your records and all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, I didn't order the jackets yet. You're like, I got a delay there. So it's if I took you on a tour of the back, it would look like a hoarder's paradise at the moment, because it's just boxes everywhere, and it's things that eventually will come back and print. I just printed like thousands and thousands of Toasters jackets for Two Tone Army and Sub 56 and Kaboom. Sure, I'm missing one, but because the Toasters will be back on the road full time, late summer, early fall. So I need to have my crap together, have all those records ordered, so the sleeves are all here. And as the records show up over the summer, ship them down to Texas where he's at, or ship them, over to Europe, wherever he wants them to go. But I need to be, planning that game right now,
Yeah.
And, at some point, you feel like how much money is going out the door, you just have to do it, you just got to store the stuff, be ready to go. I had just like another, whole batch of Memphis Goffley sleeves, because eventually I'm going to need to make more records for them. Eventually they're going to be hitting the road again,
Yeah.
The kind of weird thing is I have a little bit of time, because, during the pandemic, a lot of those bands, those kind of legacy bands, they aren't really super stoked about doing a ton of e-commerce. Really not something they love to do. They're much better suited having it at the merch table,
Right.
selling it right there. So that's kind of like, with a lot of those bands, that's my strength, where like I get to do the grunt work, for this, to earn the sales that I need to make the project profitable for everybody else, but a full-time band or a very busy band isn't going to have time to run the mail order,
Yeah.
So it's always been kind of the best case scenario. Now, what kind of made the pandemic interesting is that everyone, mostly at a certain level, became, right, an online salesperson. So then it became interesting to go work with bands like, okay, well, in theory, the formula was you were selling mostly at shows and I was selling online, and I get that you need to sell online now. So, let's try to do interesting things that, help everybody. So, I'll repress a record on a certain color and just give that color to, like, the prize fighters, for example. Like, you have this kind of mango, orange, yellow concoction that came out. That's just yours, So that should help you sell, copies in the repress, and I'll just still have the red and black ones. And, we probably won't bump heads too often. It should work out.
Yeah.
And, I've done a lot of cassettes over the pandemic, because people just like kind of cheap, fun, collectible things that aren't going to break the bank, and
Is that what like people actually putting these things in tape decks, or are they just collectibles.
Yeah. I mean, some don't. I mean, I turn my camera up to my shelves up here, just tons of old cassettes, just ska cassettes everywhere.
I think
Maybe we'll do
people
that.
people of a certain age get a kick out of it.
Yeah, we do, because we were just sort of collecting them, you know, and I played them. You know, I have currently at the shop, but I have a semi-high-end JVC boombox from 1981 that's getting the service love right now. But, you know, people are spending like thousands of dollars on boomboxes to play cassettes.
I know.
You know? And
I've been looking around.
yeah, it's very hard,
it's hard.
know. But, you know, you can get pretty affordable ones at every like electronics store now. There's like Radio Shack versions, you know, that have, and it's,
I get tempted to get one of those on Amazon, but then I read the reviews and I'm like, yeah,
they're made kind of crappy.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you just want to play a tape,
it's
and
cool.
you don't want to go in more than like $60 to $70,
right?
You work okay.
So,
but you know, once you hold it in your hand, you're like, oh, is this made of balsa wood?
So you're dealing in the physical space, which leads me to my question as to, I guess, why you stay away from the digital stuff.
I just feel like,
besides some of the obvious reasons,
I just feel like, you know, that's always been the band's. That should be something the band keeps and owns, you know. I know a lot of people disagreed with me prior to streaming, and I had many arguments with, you know, notable people who were trying to create kind of ska distribution download companies, right? Like, hey, you know, all ska releases are going to be available to download as one place, and you know, like, oh, you know, I you know, you can just talk to the bands. I'm fine with it. If this band that I put out the at the time CD or vinyl wants to do it, yeah, I don't need to be involved. People are like, well, why don't you want to do it? I'm like, because, and I literally told people like Bucket, others, I'm like, I don't know how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, but someday this is just going to be kind of worthless. I just don't know. I mean, somehow they're going to screw us on this. You know, get all you can now. You know, rock and roll, get those iTunes downloads and, you know, work those numbers. I mean, get it now. You know, I don't want a part of it, but yeah, and, you know, when kind of streaming took over and all this stuff, and people were getting fractions and fractions of a cent for a play, you know, and just like, oh yeah, they figured it out. They figured out how to screw everybody.
That's basically it.
Right. And at this point, you know, for most, you know, small bands or independent bands, I mean, streaming is such a little bit of money, you know, on a monthly or yearly basis. It's like, well, why should I take a piece of that? I mean, in theory,
that's more of a loss leader for the band, really.
Right. And in some way, you know, a lot of bands, you know, I tell them, I'm like, well, it'll actually help you get people to shows and sell the physical product, but you know, you're kind of giving it away now. You know, one of the people who, you know, I had this discussion with forever was Andy Bassford, guitarist, and he had put out the Heart of the Strum CD and was doing really well. And I had met him when he was touring with Monty Alexander, playing a jazz show in Chicago, and he actually hadn't put out that album yet. But when I was talking to him, because we're friends of, you know, people who were in, you know, EightTracks, Rich Grayco, and he's the one who actually told Andy to put me on the guest list. I can't afford jazz shows. But long story short, Andy, he told me, he's like, I'm doing this concept album. I'm reinterpreting the entire Harder They Come soundtrack in my unique, you know, reggae guitar style. I'm like, it just blew my mind. I'm like, holy crap. Like, that's a great idea. He's like, you think so? I'm like, yeah. No one's done that. He's like, yeah, I got an artist, you know, kind of tweaking the cover. I'm like, oh my God, I'm all in. Let me do the vinyl. It's like, we just met. It was basically, it's kind of like, I know a lot of other people. We have like a lot of close friends, I'll keep you in mind. I'm like, okay, cool,
And
Then when
sure
he put out
enough, yeah.
right, and then when he put out the CD, I just messaged him like, oh my God, you gotta let me do it. You gotta let me do it. I mean, records are expensive. You don't want that headache. You just want to have, a little income from it and some records to sell at shows. And, records really like, bring your profile up. You're kind of in this different world, more people need to know about you. And the only way we're going to reach young people, right, is through records, through vinyl records. Your audience base is kind of old, People who know about Andy Bassford are like the old reggae heads, like, holy crap, he was on that, 1984 Toots and the Maytals tour. He was that, white guy just jamming out, like in the corner. I'm like, oh my God, Andy, people in the know about him, right?
Yeah.
To get the young people to know about him is, we can do this through vinyl records. And that's kind of what, that project was about, And he literally said that, we did vinyl records and we did cassette tapes and I even did 8-tracks.
8-track. I just saw that you were putting out some 8.
Yeah, I did some for the Scatolites. I don't have a picture of them because I still have to assemble them. But
where do where do you make those?
This may sound funny. They're made in Arlington, Texas.
Oh, geez.
You could drive there.
There must be some niche
there's really
for that.
only one. There's only one place that makes them, and they basically bulk erase old 8-track cartridges, re-record over them, and then I've got to literally hand assemble all the labels and sleeves. And but it's really great, not so much because selling 30 8-tracks doesn't make anyone any real money. I mean, but the impact, when I take a video of a Scatolites or an Andy Bassford 8-track playing in an 8-track player going through my vintage boombox. I mean, I'm not joking. Like the views on that are just through the roof. And, most people aren't going to buy the 8-track. Let's be honest. It's, a super collector is going to be the one that wants to buy it. But, that able to get the views for people to know about the normal projects, right? To know that, oh, Scatolites Bashaka's out on vinyl. And 8-track, what a nutcase. But, they may go buy the vinyl. Or they may just go and see the band, the next time they come through because of seeing a video, right? Of me playing their 8-track. So, a lot of these kind of niche formats are really valuable because it just gets eyes on the project in general. And without something like that, you've got to pay Facebook?
I know, yeah, really.
And you're like, you get the stats, you're like, I don't know if I believe these stats, Mr. Zuckerberg. I don't feel like I got one sale at all during the whole time this was running. This seems really fake, and you spent, $20 or $30 on some Facebook ad. And, one properly done 8-track video is going to get you more impact, right? And more sales on your vinyl or knowing that a band's on tour.
Yep.
Than anything else, And I'll be honest, every Andy Bassford 8-track sold. It sold out. And I had more people asking, so I sent them Andy's way, and he was selling the handful he had, and he couldn't believe it too.
Wow.
He's like, wait, some guy in the Netherlands wants my 8-track? I'm like, yeah, I'm out. So if you want to make 20, 30 bucks, like, hell yeah, And even, he was like surprised, like, I would have never guessed. But this guy is a fan for life. Like this dude, right, in the Netherlands could know a lot of people. Probably does, right?
Right.
And he gets that 8-track, one of 30. And he shows it off to everybody. And he tells people about the project. Oh, it's a reinterpretation of the Harder They Come, oh, Harder They Strum. People are like, what? I've never heard of that. And they go either on Spotify, and stream it, or maybe they'll buy the vinyl. Who knows? But all of a sudden, this guy having this one, artifact is like turning people on. And what a lot of people don't realize is that, vinyl in the 90s, that was its only purpose. So all these people, I make fun all the time, like, oh, you got a good price on that Hepcat record? You only paid $90 for it? You do realize that was a $9.98 list when it came out. And my wholesale price at the time was $6. So that record I own, I paid $6 for it.
Well, you're ahead of the curve, man. We're all trying to catch up.
Well, the reason why records came out though at that time was and they kept them cheap, is because the theory was, right, is those vinyl fans in the 90s were literally your super fan. And for every LP you sold to that kid, right, he was the coolest kid in that whole town. And he would show that off or tell about the project or the album. Like they had it was like a 20 or 30 to 1 ratio. It was real math. And they basically said, if we can get 1,000 of an LP out there, that's going to help us sell 30,000 CDs.
Wow.
Those 1,000 LPs, they literally linked to being able to sell X amount of CDs. And people like Epitaph and Fat, they had those metrics, So that's why vinyl in the 90s was super cheap. There were $7.98 lists records for years. You can get Neutral Milk Hotel records for like $7.98 for decades, And that band is as popular today as it was back then. Well, partly because they got all these really cheap records out in people's hands.
Right.
Now they're like of a legendary status, And so it's just kind of funny that it's come around, right? So now vinyl records are basically the mainstream format, other than streaming.
Yep.
Right. So it's for anyone who thinks that they're like cooler than everyone else for buying vinyl records now, you're not. I'm sorry. It really has become the mainstream format. You've read all the articles about how it's bigger, sales wise than CDs. It's just the animal, right?
And in our genre, we got all the sound systems and selectors and stuff that are trying to get their hands on that, because that's how you play it live. All right, I have some comments that have been popping up.
Comments?
Yeah.
How does that work?
I am multi-streaming to Facebook Live and YouTube, and so I've been getting running through here. Trisha Lynn Gonzalez Johnson says fun. Bobby Rubin is saying, "Oh, I need to get that on vinyl when it comes out." He's talking about the Mr. Kingpin album.
Hell yeah!
He wrote lyrics for the last song on that album.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Go look at it. Whenever You're Away.
Yep, that was Bobby Rubin wrote the lyrics.
Whoa.
Annie Clements out on the East Coast is saying, "Good evening, gentlemen." Bill Borhausen, Ska Bill says hello to Chuck and John.
Good evening. Good day, sir.
Tazy Phillips, hi, much love to you both.
Oh, wow.
And
he's earlier out there.
I know. He's actually going to be on my show coming up soon.
Oh, cool. Tazy's awesome. We go way back, and I tell this one specific story all the time to people.
Oh,
everyone at some point is like, "Oh yeah, man," everyone has their Sublime story, right? And I go, "Yeah, first time I saw Sublime, there was like 9 people in a bar, and it's all because of Tazy."
Yep.
I was on the West Coast visiting for, I don't remember, for some reason. I don't know if it was a show or business or something. And, he was my host, let me stay with him for a few days. And, it was just like Tuesday night. He's like, "Oh, I'm going to take you to see this band I think you're going to dig. Called Sublime." Like, and, I just kind of remember like going to the show and just being impressed that I left with songs in my head. That's hard to do. You know, anyone who's an artist, like writing songs that people immediately take home with them and remember, freaking hard.
Yeah.
So I remember Taser's like, "Oh, what do you think of them?" I'm like, I can't get some of these damn songs out of my head. This could be huge. Sure enough, you know, he had his finger on the pulse. It was not much longer until it was huge. But you know, it was kind of one of those things when it happened, you're like, oh yeah. I have no doubt that was possible because, yeah, those damn songs were in my head. So yeah, it's fun it's fun that we're all still around.
It is.
I got to see Tansy at the Scott Brewing anniversary a few years ago, so we got to hang out. I think I did some radio interview with him in a Starbucks.
You probably did.
Yeah,
probably did. Scott Bill is asking, when is the next Jump Up Records Chicago show? So what's up? What's going on in Chicago?
Man, someone tell me. No, I think everyone here kind of easing their way back into live shows. So we're not rushing into things. So I think the first few shows that I've seen announced are like a Muster Plug show in October.
Yep.
We may do something Lollapalooza weekend. Pick a few jump up bands if they want to come through the Chicago traffic. I was given that date like the other day, but I mean that's like end of July. But no one really feels 100%.
They're kind of testing the waters right now.
Yeah, but in theory, like Chicago's going to be fully open in a week or so. So we'll see. I mean, I'm not like. It's kind of weird because I understand everyone's apprehension, but I'm also at some point freaked out by everyone's, you know, as soon as, you know, all these fests were announced. Like, I mean, I've never seen so many festivals sell out so quickly, right? You know, the Lollapaloozas of the world and this and that. You're just like, oh, you know, and not like smaller numbers. It's like, no, full capacity. Like, oh boy, here we go. But you know, all the indoor venues are, you know, kind of a different animal. They're like, well, you know, still kind of like closed ventilation, you know, how do we, you know, take on this? So I don't really know the answer. I wish I knew. I don't think I'll be going back to Delilah's in June, but he thought maybe in July. So we'll kind of see. But you know, when a lot of you will see me next, I may be, you know, maybe with my new eyes after my eye procedures. So, you know, I won't be spilling your drinks and tripping over your feet like the past 2 years. That's not because I want. You know, I wasn't a close talker on purpose. I literally couldn't see who I was talking to.
Well, we really hope that goes well.
Yeah. I think it will.
It sounds pretty routine what they got to do.
Yeah, that whole LASIK thing, they're fixing everything good, but yeah, at this point, it's everything I do is funky. I am blown away that I haven't like misshipped more records. Actually, I haven't misshipped anyone a record all year, so you know, no mistakes happening. So I think the brain fog is not there. Just you know, the eyes are coming.
All right, so I have a loaded question here, and it's not really our question to answer.
Woo!
Travis Maynard, who do y'all think will be the mystery headliner for Supernova?
I do not know. I do not know.
Yeah.
You know, I'm really low on that totem pole. So.
And it is a bummer, though. I hate to even broach that subject about Hepcat. Because I know there's many angles on it, and I know for a fact, like Greg, you know, was saying how kind of upset he was that happened like that.
It's rough, you know. When it was announced on the same weekend, you know, as Riot Fest, I thought, well, it could go okay logistically, because at least they're halfway across the,
Right.
it makes sense in a touring sort of way.
Chicago to Chicago
right.
to Virginia is a hop,
Yeah.
skip, and a jump. But
and then when Riot Fest sold out so quickly, I thought, okay, well maybe everything's gonna be okay, because at that point you're not competition. You can't sell another ticket,
yeah,
right? So I remember, I think the last 2 years ago when we were trying to do, when the Selector was coming through and they were playing Riot Fest, and Selector were doing a bunch of tour dates, and they were with Rhoda Dakar, and I reached out to Rhoda and I said, hey, when you play these big fests, right? You kind of have abbreviated sets. So if for some reason, I've been doing this a long time, you just get a bad feeling. Like if for some reason you're not going to be allowed to perform, like with the Selector and do your songs like you're doing the other cities, hit me up. I could probably work some angles and do like a little side thing. So sure enough, she messaged me like, yeah, you were right. Riot Fest told the Selector I can't do my songs, basically. There's no time, So of course the Selector's like felt bad, that they can't do all the Rhoda Dakar songs that were in all the other sets. So she reached out to me. I said, okay, well, I'll put together an after party. We'll have the Crombies back here. It'll be a good time. It'll be kind of rushed to be back. And what basically happened is, Reggie's gave me the date. They thought it was a great idea. And just so no one got mad, I had to wait till every official Riot Fest after party sold out. Everyone.
Did the people from Riot Fest tell you that?
No, me and Reggie's felt that this was the only safe way of not causing trouble.
Yeah.
Like if all of a sudden we were a competition, then we're kind of messing things up and people could be mean the following year.
True.
So we couldn't announce that Rhoda Dakar show until 10 days before the show. Now, we had already things in the background working, like the Crombies were working on the set, and
I'm sure word was getting out unofficially, right?
A little bit, yeah. I had a flyer already built, ready to launch as soon as that last show was announced as sold out. And in 10 days, we packed a nice little room, after one of the Riot Fest days. And it was just so complicated to get into the Riot Fest gate and find Rhoda, and then get her a couple blocks away, and then get in an Uber and get all the way to Reggie's, and wow. Get the band there. And it was absolute logistical nightmare for me. But it was one of those things where well, I want to see this happen.
Yeah.
I was deprived of seeing Rhoda Dakar perform Body Snatcher songs, and well, even if the only thing I get out of this is me watching this show, that's enough for me. And it was just stressful. Oh my God, it was so stressful. But at the end of the day, when I saw people in the crowd, right, sing, Body Snatcher songs performed with the Crombies back, I saw tears. I saw some hardcore, tough-looking dudes tear up because they were like, I never thought I'd see, right, To Experience performed or something, live, or Ruder Than You. She did all of her little two-tone hits, did every one of them. People were just so happy. And after everyone bought stuff. We made these limited edition prints. I have a printmaker friend that she made a bunch of stuff, and she hand signed them in a silver pen and sold those. And she was just so ecstatic, about the show. But going into it, it was super stressful. We had no practices, right? We were literally just going to open the doors and just see how it went, And literally the owner of Reggie's, who has the condo at the top of the whole thing, he opened up his condo for her to have a place to chill out and have a dressing room and that kind of a thing. And
oh, that's cool.
It was cool. So she could chill out with the dogs. It made her feel really uncomfortable because at a certain point, people do these shows because they trust me, right? But it's kind of like the final line in the A-Team, right? I love it when a plan comes together.
Right.
There's a lot of points where I'm just running on fumes. Like, well, you know, it's all going to work out, you know? And some artists don't love that, you know? We're not going to have a practice. I'm like, wasn't in the cards. I'm real sorry about that. Like, and you could just see you could just almost like cut the air in the tenseness. You're like, what do you want me to do, man? I mean, the show's at midnight. You know, we had to get you here. I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't have you backed by a band that couldn't pull it off, you know? And part of the reason why it all worked out was because when I was pitching Rhoda to do the show, right? And I said, well, I'm going to have the Crombies back. She's like, oh, I'm not familiar with them. Let me look them up. She actually did, like a week later, some event with Billy Bragg. And she said, oh, yeah, I may be doing this like one-off show in Chicago, you know, with Chuck Wren and the Crombies. I don't know how I feel about that. And Billy Bragg, I mean, I met Billy Bragg once. Billy Bragg told Rhoda Dakar, like, the Crombies? Chuck? Oh, you're in good hands. Don't worry about it. Take the gig. When she told me that, I said, wait, Billy Bragg said that? Like, I met him once. Like, well, you know, apparently we do good enough work and we keep our word and get people paid that, you know, there's people out there like, oh, no, those are the right people. Like, take the gig. They're going to work hard for you, you know.
And of course, the Crombies.
I think, right. And I think that like kept her from like not, well, get me in a cab and send me back to send me back to my hotel. She's like, Billy Bragg said this is going to work out. So yeah. And you know, the Crombies met Billy Bragg at one of the Riot Fests, and you know, they got along famously. I think Dave Simon made it happen really good. So, you know, our reputation precedes me. And that's kind of what happened with all those Jamaican oldies shows too.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, you treat the first handful, you know, really well, and the reputation is there, you know, because all those dudes talk.
Right.
You know, so the first time we booked Derek Morgan, he called everybody else. You know, he called, you know, Junior Francis and Stranger Cole and Moss and Pat Kelly and everyone we had done. And he's like, okay, Chuck, you check out. I'm like, oh. Like, yeah, I talked to everybody. Like,
that's wow.
Who's everybody?
That'd be amazing to get some of those going again.
Right. What was great about those shows is we always had the Charlie Organer ace in our pocket.
Yep.
So if I ever felt that there was something like weird or like, I don't know if everyone's on the same page here, Charlie like would call him up and basically say like, I will be the band leader with this band. You have nothing to worry about. You know, if Chuck says you're going to get this amount of money, you're going to get this amount of money. You know, Darren Reggae, you know, helps us, you know, make sure that you get safely to and from everywhere you go, and he'll be, you know, so Charlie would just make one phone call, like, everything's fine. Like, oh, okay. I got to close this door.
All right. Thank you guys,
you know,
for.
What I think is like reputation is like everything these days. You know, it's like, you know, you got to treat people right. You know, and you know, no one hates somebody for failing. They just hate someone for, you know, not being forthright about the whole thing. You know, if you're like, look, I did my best and still wasn't good enough. You know, it's like the Paul Schaefer thing in the, you know, in Spinal Tap. You know, it's my fault. Kick my ass. Kick my ass. No, right here. Please kick it. You know, I did my best. Kick my ass. You know. But yeah, I don't know when our shows are coming back. Hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon. Reggae Edith says hi, Chuck.
Woo!
And,
hello.
And then Travis Maynard, he chimed in about great show. That was for the Rhoda Dakar.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And
I mean, it was a good time.
Yep. Okay, so let me let me
And
back
let me
up.
show you one other. I'm going to show you one other thing.
Okay.
But if everybody didn't know, so Bim Scala Bim has a new album out called Sonic Tonic.
On Specialized, right? Or at least in
Yeah,
the
and
UK.
we did the vinyl. So we'll be dropping that in a few weeks because we wanted to give the Specialized crew a head start since all that money goes to charity and whatnot.
Yep.
And then this is the one that everyone seems to be bugging me about. Everybody wants to relive the scofflaws days. But I'm very happy, pleased to have this in my hand. So those are going to be technically in the second Record Store Day drops in a few weeks. But I have to let people know that if you're part of the Ska LP of the Month Club, which has been running for 20 years now, this isn't some like, you see all these Vinyl Me Pleases, all these like clubs, like, I was doing that in 2001, man. I had a vinyl club in 2001. Way ahead of you guys. But we actually sent all those records out, like all the two you saw and those two new ones. So membership, like American Express, membership has its rewards. You cats are going to have the scofflaws and the Bim Scala Bim like a month before everybody else.
You heard it here, folks.
Right, you heard it here.
You got to get on top of that record.
So next year,
club.
You jump on that.
Speaking of
and it's a good way of saving money. I mean, part of the reason why we've kept that club going and it just grows each and every year is because records are stupidly expensive. And if you can get a dozen records for $150 like one time in, that's a good deal. So, we're trying to not make things expensive,
Now, another thing that you've been doing for, I guess, 20 years, right, is a radio show.
Yeah, well, it's on semi-retirement because they won't let us in the studios.
So are you guys not broadcasting at all then?
We've been just sort of doing like playlists.
Okay.
Just kind of soul lists. So we're just kind of, my friend Jason's helped me out and we're, just sort of doing playlists and uploading it to so at least there's, ska being played on the radio show, but
you haven't been in there.
Kind of like, in the back of my record say Jamaican music the old fashioned way. I'm old fashioned even with respect to media. I can't podcast, man. I can't sit, in a room by myself, right?
You're doing it right now, bro.
No, I kind of. No, I'm not doing it right now. I'd have to disagree with that.
Oh.
There are people listening to me right now. There are people watching me right now.
True.
So that's the beauty of what, radio is for me, is that I go in with a set amount of semi-planned music, right? But I'm bringing in tons more music than I can actually play, and I make it up as I go along. And, the banter in between songs, you never know what tangent I'm going to go on, right? I may talk about some crazy story about some record, because, a million years ago, the New York citizens crashed my, the frat house I was living in for a summer. You never know so radio for me is that kind of like excitement and, it being unexpected.
Right.
I can't really sense that I could pull that off if I'm in one room with headphones playing records. I think I would come across really stoic, and I don't want to do that. This is very much like a radio show.
Yeah.
In my way, it's live. People are listening live, and I'm getting a sense that there's activity as I talk, that someone's there, and if I don't have at least that belief in the back of my head, I just don't. I think I would do it. I think I would put together a really bad radio podcast if it was just me playing records and talking. I think I would not even share it with people because I would not like it. I would not like it. So I can't wait to go back kind of on the radio. And I know radio is like an old timey medium. Fewer people listen to it, but there's just something really. I actually am trying to go back to my old station at Northwestern because they're looking to get alumni back in.
Oh, really?
And it's funny, I still run into people all the time in random places. Like, oh, you still on WNUR? I haven't been on that station since 1996. They're still like in their mind, like, that was the sweet spot. I listen to you Sundays at 9 on WNUR. Like, they'll run into me 20, 25 years later, like, you still on NUR? I'm like, no.
I used to listen to you.
That the last time I saw you, I told you I was on the Loyola station. Oh, yeah.
I still remember being flabbergasted that there was like a ska radio show when I first moved to Chicago.
What year was that?
What year would that have been? 97, 98?
So I was on the Bear at that point, I think. WCVR. I went to a commercial. Yeah, I went to a commercial station and I started selling ad time to pay for the time. So that was stressful. But at that time, just to reach more people, right? I felt like getting the show on a commercial station, even if I had to broker the time and pay for it and sell ads. That was the best way of doing it. And the thing is, it was one of those things where I never had any doubt that I couldn't pay for the 2 hours of time with ads. And it never occurred to me that I would fail. Like, oh no, I could sell ads. I could go like loop in every store and, make sure that they were all, sponsors. And, if they were all sponsors, then they would get the official Everything Offbeat CD sampler and they would be able to get those for my cost, which means they would make a ton of money when they sold hundreds and hundreds of each. And that would pay for the ad time. I'm just like, that made sense to me. And I would just do stuff like that, and, I guess I'm the ultimate, carpetbagger. I'm always like, oh no, we'll just make it work. Let's go
optimist.
for it. I think a lot of the people who are still doing this, right? I mean, we don't really make decisions based upon sitting down, making pros and cons lists, right? That's not how we operate. We're like, no, this is the way it's got to be. We're just going to do it. We're just going to do it now. Tomorrow we're going to do this. We're going to start and do this. And all of a sudden, you have a radio show, or all of a sudden you're, I started DJing not because I wanted to be a DJ or a personality. It's because I was sick of, these cool ass shows being at like Metro, right? And then the sound guys, right, in between bands would just put on some Black Sabbath because that's what they were into.
Right.
And I was like, oh, what a great way of killing the mood, guys. But I remember after some show, I think it was like a selector show or something, it was early on. And the whole reason why I got involved with Metro and the whole, everything that came out of that was me, being a nosy buddy and just saying, hey, way to go killing the vibe of that ska show. Your sound guys put on Black Sabbath in between this really happy and positive music. I'm like, that's got to stop. Let me play records in between bands. Let's make this, right, an experience from the minute the door opens to the minute they walk out the door.
Yeah.
It's going to build something, And, Joe Shanahan, the owner, is just like, you're absolutely right. He knew about my radio show at Northwestern. He's like, come on in and talk to me. And that's how it all started. And it all started from there. And then he's like, well, I want you to pick the opening bands. And it was just like, okay. And it just became a thing, And at some point, in the heyday of, the third wave, it's like I was at Metro so often. It was crazy. And I was just taking all the opening acts and DJing, in between bands. And it was just because I wanted them to stop playing Black Sabbath. And I have nothing against Black Sabbath, but it doesn't have a place in between a tour that has Let's Go Bowling on the Selector. I mean, there's just no way that that's good. And I think these sound guys did it because they wanted to kind of, mess with the system. You stupid ska kid. It's like, so that's how it happened, and a lot of this is just accidental. Starting Jump Up, right, was accidental. It came from, the radio show, and it came from DJing. And then when I saw all these things happening, right, you saw, the early days of Moon, and you saw all the stuff coming out on the West Coast. I'm like, what about here? There's a lot of stuff happening here in Michigan, in Chicago. And like, I'm putting out a comp. I'm putting out a comp of just all the Midwest ska bands. And we're going to pay all the bands in copies of the comp, and they're going to sell it at their shows. And there's no way this is going to, it was literally one of those things. You're just like, and you just did it. The next morning you were just, writing letters or making phone calls because it was 1992. I didn't want to start a record label. That wasn't the intention. The intention was to promote all these bands that I was afraid, literally I was afraid that they were going to be overlooked because the West Coast and East Coast were just going to take over. That's what tends to happen in general, you know?
And in some ways it's still...
In some ways it still happens.
It still happened a little bit, but not as much because of you.
Right. And it was a very proud moment to look back at, like American Gothic 1 and 2 and like, bands like Mustard Plug and Suicide Machines, and they were all on there. Slapstick. I mean, I remember I wanted Slapstick on American Gothic 2 so bad, and Matt Stamps couldn't for some reason put a DAT in the mail. It's just like, dude, it's Elgin. Just put it in the mail, And he wasn't making the deadlines. Like, you need to be on this comp. This comp is going to mean something. It's going to get you places, And I think what was kind of the funny thing about Slapstick is they weren't ska kids, They were just punk kids playing ska, but they never really like thought of themselves as part of the ska scene per se. So when someone like me is like, no, come on, you got to be on this. This is great stuff. And like, do you want to be on it or not? These are all phone calls. He's like, oh yeah, we totally want to be on. You just couldn't put a DAT in the mail. So I remember I literally, the day before I was going in the studio to compile the album, I went to a record store that I knew had a copy of the 45, like a clean sealed copy. And I just bought it. And I'm not joking, I went up to the studio with a bunch of DATs and a turntable. And I said, yeah, this one we're going to have to rip from vinyl. They're like, cool. That's how they were on it. It would have never been on American Gothic 2 if I didn't give a shit and wanted to be on it. And that was, literally one of their first, if not first, I can't remember anymore. It's all hazy now, but appearances on a ska comp. They were from a different world. They're part of that Elgin punk scene, and I just felt like this was something weirdly magical, and they needed to be on it. It's almost like Tazy when he's like, "Hey, you got to come and see this band Sublime." Like, okay. Like, if someone would have visited me at that time, like, "Oh, you got to go see Slapstick. There's something special here." I can't put my finger on it, and you just sometimes just had to do the things that made sense. And after all said and done, the band was like, "Oh, it was awesome you did that."
Yeah.
Because we're getting a ton of mail. Like, this is great. Like, thank you. But if someone didn't care, be like, screw you. You didn't get your DAT in. You're not on it. You can't really have that attitude. If it really meant something to you, you're going to see it all the way through, even if it's going to a record store, buying a copy of a sealed copy.
Okay.
And be like, gotta rip it from this, guys.
This reminds me of an interaction that you and I had one night for a certain release that you needed, and you're like, dude, do you have the
right. Yes.
I don't want to put out details, but I supplied you with some audio.
It was the Check 1-2, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Specialized comp, and I'm like, yeah, I got to get this thing in production, and let's just say I'm having some delays from my British counterparts. I don't really need them if you can rip the CD yourself. And you're like, okay. And we got it done. I got to repress that. That's really good.
Did you guys ever
think you're on that.
Yeah. Rude King is on that. The one and only vinyl release for Rude King.
Yeah. Oh, people love that comp.
Oh,
And the
it's
thing is,
awesome.
like, the thing is that a ton of those went overseas. Like a ton. Obviously through Specialized who use it to raise money, but I sold a lot overseas, and those are all people who are basically getting a taste of, right, 15, 16 American bands playing songs they know. Um, I truly think that things like that can be incredibly helpful. Like, like Boomtown United's appearances on, that comp, and did another one. They on my drink with Scott. I'm losing track, but
Yeah, they
people
are.
knew about. They are, right. I think people knew about them out of the gate because of those couple comps, and they were just ready to buy when it came out. Or even like Grover, who took the record exclusively for Europe. They're like, oh no, we're familiar with the band. Like, yeah, we'll take a couple hundred to start. Like, whoa, perfect, And he said he's finding a lot of homes for it, So, there's a lot of interesting ways of promoting bands before they get their full lengths out, and these little projects that maybe you look at it like, well, I got 10, 15 copies and sold them, it was cool, but it's got a much longer, right, value, because you kind of need to play the long haul.
Yeah.
The truth is, like, any band could probably make 200 records and get ripped off on the manufacturing, sell it themselves to their fan base, and just not lose money, maybe make a little bit and be done. But other than bragging rights, what did that accomplish?
Right. I pondered that many a time.
Right. I mean, the reality is, like, I tell people all the time, people say, like, oh, you don't need record labels anymore. I'm like, bullshit. Like, you need somebody other than yourself promoting your band, your brand, right? If you're the band and you put out the record yourself, you have limited reach. You can only post on someone's wall so many times where someone's like, stop it, dude. I know your record's out. Just leave me alone, right? I mean, the thing is, like, every time I put out a new record, I'm repping everything that came out that's still in print before it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I do those sales where I'm basically giving people a few dollars off, or kind of like buy at wholesale rates kind of thing. And what it basically does is it gets people to try something. So they look at the list, they're like, okay, well, I'd like to pick up that Toasters and Mephistopheles record, but let me try 3 new bands. Oh, I heard this band on this comp. I'll try a Scotch Bonnets. I'll try a Loving Poppers. I'll try a Boss Riot, whatever it is, and then all of a sudden they love those records and they tell people, and then you'll get a few, regular, normal, full price sales. And then, it's the long game,
It's the long game.
And in the end, you'll find 300 to 500 more new fans for somebody.
Yeah.
By making more records and trying to find new homes for them.
That's
like the whole, like, making 200 records, selling them quickly at high prices and moving on. It's just like, what did they do, man?
Yeah.
They didn't do anything.
That's why I love comps. Like,
yeah,
I'm so glad you still are doing that.
The free comps? People love them. Like, I never really realized, because, these days people are like, oh, what's it take for someone to, buy a CD? Well, no one wants to buy a CD, but people love getting free comps that are CDs because, older people still have cars with CD players.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't have a lot of
cars.
CDs.
Right.
And they don't have new CDs because they're not buying new CDs. So they get a CD sampler, they're playing it in their car. And guess who all of a sudden has a captive audience for 80 minutes, and I'm not competing with, I don't know, the internet,
Right.
Once that CD's in, I've got you for 80 minutes. You're not being distracted, listening to something else on Spotify for a half second, or, Spotify suggesting things to you based upon how much they've been paid by major labels to suggest those things to you. No, I got you. That 35-cent CD has done more good, than any amount of advertising you can do anywhere else. And then I realized how many people just love the CDs. Like, people ask, they'll do a mail order, like, oh, I know you give me a free copy of the CD already. Can I get 2 others for friends? Like, absolutely. Like, people ask all the time for extras to give to people. Like, that's the purpose. Like, fantastic,
Yeah.
Um,
Trisha Lynn has a cool little memory that
yeah.
she said, do you remember when the Bosstones went to Japan and they asked Dickie about the Miggities and you sent our album over there? She said we were just kids.
Kind of do remember that. I don't remember the backstory, but I do remember something to that extent.
That's pretty cool, though.
I love that record. The other day, I found one randomly in the wild in Chicago like 2 years ago at a thrift store. I just bought it, and I don't remember who I gave it to. I remember saying, like, yeah, this was like, a band put out by some pretty young kids at the time who were great. You should have this. I don't even remember who I gave it to. It was somebody like, a little bit younger than me that would have probably missed that. Let me know what you think. Was that a thrift store for 50 cents? Wow. But how? I don't know why I would have had to send it to Japan. I just don't remember the story. There's all kinds of stuff like that people remind me.
Well, when you've been at it, And
I'm like, oh yeah. Like, my favorite Boston story is like literally one of the first times they were coming through the Midwest when that first record was dropped. They didn't really know anybody. And they were playing Milwaukee, and they knew me from the radio show. I talked to Joe Gittleman on the phone, and like, can we send you our merch? Like, we don't know anybody else. The merch company needs to send it somewhere. So I remember blowing off my classes all day at Northwestern and just hanging out at the radio station waiting for the Bosstones t-shirt merch to show up. And then as soon as the boxes came, I threw it in the car and drove to Milwaukee to see a show.
Wow.
And, you're like, it's weird, right? It's weird to think you don't know anybody else. You didn't know at the time anybody else in Chicago. I have a feeling they knew other people. They just weren't very reliable.
Maybe. Was that Let's Face It, right? Or was that?
Oh, yeah, that would have been like Tang, that first Tang album.
Okay.
So they probably knew plenty of people. They're probably, will these actually get to our show? You're like, oh, you're coming to our show in Milwaukee and you have a car? Can we ship these to you? You're obviously, reliable, and you're going to a real school, so you're probably not a dummy. You'll probably show up with them. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. But back then we did stuff because, I blew off classes because like this band needs their merch. They're going to be something someday. I want to help them. I want people to be able to wear their shirts. You just did things.
Well, you were right.
That's a good way of putting
it. You nailed it.
You nailed that one. One more on the list.
So we've been having a great discussion that I feel like we're an hour plus in, and I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface.
Oh, well, that's probably true.
Because there's so much to talk about in terms of those early Midwest bands, and
yeah,
I feel like I need to have you on again.
Oh, I'd come back on again
for a part 2.
I think to some extent, people see a certain amount of authenticity, right? And
yeah,
I haven't changed. I'm still literally, kind of that 18, 19, 20-year-old kid running around trying to get bands they believed in their merch on time for some small show. If you were that passionate about it then, like Tazy watching this now, we're all kind of doing it because it's a part of us, and we never ever thought that it shouldn't be a part of us. We're still going into every day, with the same enthusiasm. And some days it kicks your ass. If you're, if it's a business for you like it is for me, there's some days it's, oh man, I just want to go home. Like, I just want to stop packing mail order. I just want to go home. But
mail order is not fun.
Right. But at some point, you gotta like think like, well, I'm very fortunate. I never really had to put on a tie to go to work.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't that rude, but you know what I mean. Like a corporate tie.
Yeah.
Not a two-tone tie.
I wore checkers just for
I
you.
can pull that look off every day. Well, great. It's still interesting, and I think a few of us out there kind of helping keep some of these old guys relevant is important. I mean, I remember bullying Bucket into letting me do Toasters vinyl. Like, dude, you got to have it, man. It's gonna be all that's left. He's like, oh, you think so? It's just like, oh, you were right there.
Yeah. And now I just talked to him a few weeks ago. He was on, and he is slowly trying to get, like he was telling me he's never had all the albums available on vinyl at the same time.
It's very tough to do.
Yeah. So he's slowly trying to get there.
Yeah. So I've got 4 things right now in various stages of production for him. But the truth of the matter is, and I tell him this all the time, I'm like, well, if you always have Two-Tone Army, and then you have, Skaboom, the Dub 56, New York Fever, whatever, people are always going to buy Two-Tone Army as their first choice. So running out of Two-Tone Army at various stages is a good thing, because it lets other records shine. It lets that person come up and like, oh, well, let me try Dub 56, which is a fantastic record. Or, God forbid someone listens to what the band was, circa 1990 or 1989. I mean, it's a very different sound, but a great sound. So and they still perform those songs. You know what I mean? So It's not like you're buying a record, you're like, I don't know any of this stuff. Any record you buy from the Toasters, there are going to be 2 or 3 songs on that record that
Yep.
So running out of one for a period of time is a good thing. It lets other ones shine. Otherwise you're just gonna, sell the same thing over and over and over again. And that, that's what's kind of funny is like, as someone who, puts out like, God Bless Satan, Mephistopheles records. I mean, sometimes it's really hard to get like those old school, deer in the headlight fans to try something else. Like, you really just want to buy that one record, just that one. You don't want to try this one? No, what I want. Like, okay. And sometimes being out of like God Bless Satan for a while is good, because you'll sell more Maximum Perversions. Or now that we have Mighty Whitey on vinyl, people are trying that.
Yeah.
People wouldn't touch that record with a 100-foot pole when it came out. So it's really interesting that revisionist history over the years are like, oh, people want that now. I mean, it was even like that with Maximum Perversion. Like, people dogged on that record so hard. Like, they wanted God Bless Satan Take 2. And I remember everyone just like wrote reviews that were just not giving Maximum Perversion a chance. I'm like, well, that's unfair. A band doesn't want to be a dog and pony show. They don't want to just do the same thing over and over again. I mean, this is a complex and different record, So even when I put out Maximum Perversion, I had a little bit of a hesitation, because I remember those reviews, and I didn't agree with those reviews, but I remember them. And it was just funny when the record did pretty good, and all these people were like, oh my God, I'm so psyched for this record. I'm like, you're probably all those 16-year-old kids that, refused to buy it, made your friend give you a burn copy, and then you wrote a really bad review of it in your zine, and then you passed out 300 copies that helped not sell that CD. back in the day, and now you're like, oh my god, this record's so epic. Like, no, you didn't really feel that way.
Tell you
Like,
what, everyone wants it on vinyl now.
I know, and it's great, but that's what I'm saying is that vinyl is allowing a lot of albums to have a second life.
Yeah.
Like otherwise those reviews are still out there, and now people are like, oh, this is a fantastic record, Satan stole my weed. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. Like we've just changed history like overnight just by having a vinyl release. Like you get a second lease on life. That Scatterlights record is almost getting a first lease on life,
It was just a product
important.
of bad timing.
It's important stuff, and like when I did those 3 Shanachie, re-releases, the Skavuvi and Greetings from Ska Mania and Hi Bob Ska, there were people who, were younger, right? They weren't around when those CDs were out. That was their first time ever hearing those albums because all those guys, right, were buying the 60s collections. That's the Scatterlights they had access to.
Yep.
That 90s stuff, which is fantastic because CDs are kryptonite, knew nothing about it. And now those records are, people talk about it all the time, and it could even help bands put those songs back into, their live shows. I can't remember which album the Joe Ferry written Scalloween is on that I reissued, but now it's like people talk about that and they share Scatterlights Scalloween, and they even share the Joe Ferry Big Ska Band version of Scalloween. I'm like, you don't realize that track was lost. It was gone. Like for 20 years, no one gave a crap about it. When all these records started coming out, people started to hear it again. It kind of like got in everyone's happy place again, And I know for a fact that the band is ready to put a bunch more of these, Bashaka tracks back in their set because they're stoked about this coming out on vinyl and getting a second chance, So, there's a lot of good can be done with putting out physical records, because once you're on Spotify, right, you just so much stuff. I think that's part of the reason why I just don't stream. And I mean, I have a Spotify account, but I'm never on it. It's just too much, it's just, I just can't take it. It's not really discovery for me. It's it's sensory overload.
So, my kids just actually like a couple weeks ago were begging for me to pay for Spotify because it's
not that expensive. That family,
the family one's cheap, and I went ahead and did it. But yeah, I mean, that's how they consume music. Fortunately, they're still big on buying the vinyl. Like my daughter's into vinyl, so we're buying Billie Eilish vinyl and 21 Pilots vinyl.
Yeah. What's funny is my daughter growing up, I mean, she was surrounded by records. I mean, my wife had thousands of records when we met, and there's just records everywhere. One of our first dates was going to a huge record fair.
Oh, wow.
The old, you remember, you're from the area, the old ALS Mammoth Music Mart thing. They would have the huge tent in Skokie, and all the proceeds would go to fight Lou Gehrig's disease. It'd be a tent with like 7 million records in it, and records were cheap then. There was just records everywhere. It was cheap. Everyone donated them. No one had any value. I mean, I remember going there back in the day to just, flip records. I even flip records expensive. I would find like almost every year, I'd find like 5 or 6 copies of Carlos Malcolm Ska Bonanza. Like you would just find them, for $1 each. And then I would resell them for like $15 shipped, I'm like, oh, wow, I made a killing. These days, those are probably like $100 records. I remember one time going there and finding cut out copies of Dancehall Crasher's Lockjaw because those records were promoted out more than they sold, I think that record goes for a lot of money now online. I remember coming back with like a dozen copies.
Yeah.
$1 each. And I think I sold them for 10. I thought, whoa, I made a killing. You know, I should have just thrown them in a storage locker and brought them out in 2021 and start paying for college, you know. Oh, but yeah, it's just different times, you know. It's just crazy. But yeah, kids, you know, kids consume the way they do. But I think it's funny because, you know, my daughter being surrounded by records from day one, she had very little interest.
Really? Oh, I lost you again. Hold on, I lost your audio.
You know,
Somebody's calling you, right?
yeah, and now it's like, no, it's the mainstream format basically. You know,
Yeah.
Walmart has them, you know, Target exclusives, and that's probably where you went for your Billie Eilish record. So, Urban Outfitters.
Yeah, Urban Outfitters. I worked near one. No, of course this was something new. I think that I had to pre-order it or whatever it was. But yeah, I've been in Urban Outfitters and
yeah, that old pre-order. I've heard about those.
Well, Chuck, I think we're gonna wrap things up this time, but I feel like we need to delve into the history of Midwest ska.
We could
on a future episode.
We could do that. Yeah, we could focus it more in the future.
And I feel like maybe we'll bring Ryan in.
That'd be fun
to get a little perspective too. Have a.
Yeah. You know what? Funny thing about Ryan, I literally just found out I'm a year older than him.
Oh, really?
I couldn't believe it. Because like Tammy reached out to me and basically said, "Oh, you know, trying to do something for Ryan's 50th birthday." I'm like, wait, what? How am I older? Because, you know, Ryan was, you know, kind of the elder statesman, right, of Detroit's, you know, ska scene. He was studying to be a doctor. So every like 3 minutes he had in between sound checks and stuff, he was like buried in books.
Wow.
Like studying, right? You know, like he would need to know when the sound check was because he would then find that time to drive to a library and study. So I always assumed that he had to be older than me. So it was literally just this year. I'm like, what? I'm a year older than Ryan. Like,
we're talking about Ryan Reeves from The Exceptions. Just so everybody knows.
Everybody knows I've outed him as being younger than me.
Wow.
Whatever that means. But yeah, you go through your entire life like, oh.
Fun fact, but he became a doctor. And
what's that?
I said, fun fact, he became a doctor, and the practice that he started here in Texas is where I got my back surgery 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So it all
comes full circle.
Came full circle.
Yeah, it does. Well, I've had a great time. I hopefully, you know, gave you some fun content.
You did.
Because that's what the internet's all about, is interesting content.
I think the most important thing was just getting to know you and like what's motivating you to keep doing this. I think that's really cool. Every time he gets a phone call, we lose his audio. Okay, and you're back.
Okay, I'm back. Woo! All right, better end it because I think I'm getting a multitude of calls.
It seems like it. Well, thank you, Chuck, for taking the time out, and thank you guys for watching and commenting. Please like and share. Please go to jumpuprecords.com and check out all the new stuff that's coming out for Record Store Day, as well as upcoming stuff like Mr. Kingpin album.
Yes,
which I just tangibly saw for the first time.
Yeah, today. And then I showed you a test pressing, and you got even more jazzed. So that'll be in the mail to you immediately.
Looking forward to that. All right, guys. Well, you guys have a good night, and we'll see you next week. Next week we have Taylor Morden from the ska movie. So we're gonna do some ska movie talk next week.
Nice.
All right.
Tell him that I will be making more VHS tapes for him.
Okay, I will.
I literally busted out the the machine to make the last 20.
Wow.
We can talk about VHS tapes and 8-tracks in the next one too.
Let's do it. All right.
All right, cool.
We'll see you guys later.
See you later.